We did it! What did we do? Well, we finally got to Jupiter in Sagittarius. And it's been 4 years since we've had Jupiter in any sign of essential dignity. Let's not kid ourselves. Jupiter in Leo didn't help anybody. I should know. I was there. So this waxing period from the Scorpio new moon to the Gemini full moon is actually kind of an interesting one when it comes to astrological elections. First, we have the aforementioned Jupiter in Sagittarius, a benefic planet in his domicile, which is absolutely fantastic. And we also have Venus, who is going to station direct in the end of Libra. So another benefic planet that's going to be in the sign of domicile. And while these would generally be very good planets to look to like for talismanic work or for any other sort of ritual, they're actually both in very interesting states that keeps them from being useful for a little bit of time. For Venus, the fact that she is moving so super slow throughout Libra, and she doesn't really pick up speed until she gets further into Scorpio, her sign of detriment, kind of keeps us from being able to use her in any sort of real meaningful way. You could still do like petitions and rituals for Venus, that's fine. But when it comes to talismanic work, it's her slowness, Venus is the planet's slowness, is just going to keep the talisman from being very effective, or at least it's going to make it to where, you know, the effects are very, very drawn out and kind of difficult to tell. Jupiter, on the other hand, has moved into his sign of domicile, Sagittarius, and that's fantastic. But he's going to move into it being very, very close to the sun. And when planets are very close to the sun, it diminishes their power. For Jupiter, because the sun's applying to him, we have Jupiter coming kind of to the end of his synodic phase, so Jupiter's kind of dying at this point, in like a metaphorical sense. The sun will eventually catch up to Jupiter, and he'll go into the beams of the sun, which will make him less visible, and then he'll eventually become combust, which will basically rob him of his power. So even though we're in what might seem like a really great time period for, you know, ritual work for these planets, it's actually kind of not that great, and we're going to have to wait some time. We're not going to be able to do much with Venus, really until she gets into Pisces, and we're going to have to wait until the sun moves at least into Capricorn before we're able to really do much with Jupiter, just to get further away from the sun. So we're just kind of, our hands are just kind of tied for that. So our party is going to have to wait just a little bit for Jupiter. So for this lunation period, I have 5 electional charts that I wanted to share with you guys, and we will kind of go through those hopefully fairly quickly. But I wanted to take a little bit of time starting out to answer a question that I received that is actually kind of an interesting one. So somebody reached out to me and asked about the kind of mechanics or possibility about creating talismanic pieces for other people. It's kind of become very common in magical traditions today that you want to be as involved in magic that is for you as possible. So, you know, you want to do spells for yourself. You want to, you know, do rituals for yourself. And that kind of level of personal involvement or conviction helps to empower the spell. And that is absolutely true. But historically, it was not uncommon for magic to be practiced for other people. You know, one of the main ways that, say, you know, like temples or cunning men in the past have made livings for themselves or otherwise raised funds is through the selling of charms for other people. So when it comes to astrological magic and talisman making, it is absolutely possible to make talismans and other material for another person. You don't even have to be that necessarily connected to them personally. Of course, that can help. But one of the kind of downsides or disadvantages of astrological magic is that the talisman itself kind of operates by proximity. So it becomes more helpful to be able to give the person the talisman that you're making or otherwise put it in their area, whether they're aware of it or not, so that it's able to affect them then. This is not super uncommon or super specific to astrological magic and their talismans, since a lot of other kind of talisman and charms are operating based on the assumption of what's kind of referred to as contagion, the ability to be around something and to infect it with magical power. Just kind of imbue its own power within, you know, a person's body or atmosphere or what have you. But if physical proximity or giving somebody a talismanic piece up front is not an option for whatever reason, either personal discomfort or religious differences or whatever else, then the talismanic route is not the best one to explore. What we're going to do instead is petitions, and these are basically prayers that are done to specific, you know, planets or stars or what have you at specific elected times. And these work much better over long distances than the talismanic pieces. Petitions are one of those things that need to be repeated, so they don't have quite what we would call the magical kick to it. that talismanic pieces do, but we exchange that potency for the ability to travel distances, essentially. So if you're doing long distance magic for somebody else, you're going to want to go with petitions, but astrological magic for another individual is absolutely a possibility. Like, we can do that, that's fine. You can't minimize it. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started with the elections for this lunation phase. Like I said before, we have 5 of them. 3 of them are going to be for Western Europe. You like how I point, like Western Europe's right there. And then 2 of them are going to be for us here in the United States. So Western Europe just kind of wins this time, and that's fine. But this chart here is actually the chart for the new moon exactly. The new moon occurs at 15 degrees Scorpio and 11 minutes, and that's going to be our syzygy for the next 2 weeks. And, you know, new moons and Scorpios, you know, it's just a great time for everybody to be alive. Yeah. But as you can see, it's not too terrible, because the next day, Jupiter is going to move into his domicile of Sagittarius. And, you know, all I can really say about this is that for everybody who has a Jupiter-ruled perfection year this year, we all hate you. We're all pretty jealous. But we hope it's good for you, and we hope you get something good out of it. All right, but to our main event today. Our first election, and this is actually kind of a sparse period, so I was actually kind of excited that I could get some elections out of it. The moon being kind of in this part of the zodiac is kind of a dud when it comes to fixed star talismans. There's just not really, there's only like 3 or 4 from Sagittarius to Aries. There's just not really a whole lot going on in this section of the zodiac. The kind of fall, winter skies aren't really filled with a lot of the Bohemian fixed stars. They tend to congregate in like the summer and springtime skies, or signs, sorry. So that's kind of unfortunate. But we do have a couple of Lunar Mansion talismans, and of course a Planetary talisman that we can also use for this. So our first chart is actually going to be the Western European chart, so they're going to get this one. And this chart features, of course, the Moon-Saturn conjunction on the ascendant in Capricorn. And this is going to be an example, excuse me, an example of a Saturn in Capricorn talisman. We're going to see, like I said before, we're going to see kind of a lot of these throughout the next couple of years, just because Saturn will be in Capricorn that long. And they're always good to get while you can. This one here kind of takes place around the same time as the one from the previous lunation video did. It's a Sunday and a Saturn hour at this point in time. And the moon applies to a conjunction of Saturn. Let's see, Mars is out of the way, Lord of the First in the first house. There's just a lot of really nice things about this chart. It kind of just clicks all the boxes that you need when you're looking for planetary talismans. And of course, the material will be listed here on the side for you guys to get a look at and kind of see what you need, and some uses for this chart there. Unfortunately, there's not a new, unfortunately, there's not a United States version of this chart, and we can take a quick look at why that is. So here we've changed the chart to kind of the same time in the United States, but obviously you see that the moon and Saturn have moved past their conjunction at the time, and that's not super big deal because we're going to go back in time anyway. So as you can see, by the time Saturn gets to the ascendant, the moon has moved past the conjunction of Saturn, and we're now applying to a sextile of the sun, which is not helpful. When we're doing Saturn magic, we don't want sun getting in the way. But even if we went back a day and, you know, moved forward in time a little bit to try to get Saturn on the midheaven, what we would end up getting is, well, let me go back a bit just to kind of get Saturn more on the midheaven. Okay, sure, whatever. That's close enough. It's still, my point still remains. What we would end up getting is actually the sextile to Mars interfering with the moon's conjunction with Saturn. So we can't use this, and this is why the United States does not have a Saturn talisman election on this date. So good job, Western Europe. You win this round. Alrighty, so our second talisman election chart for this lunar period is going to be a 28th mansion of the moon talisman. And when it comes to lunar mansions, I mentioned before that it's really important that we focus on the moon phase because they are really sensitive to it. The 28th mansion is about increased gain and multiplication, and so we want to only do it while the moon is waxing, and that's what we have here. From the new moon to the full moon, the moon is waxing. So the moon is placed in the 28th mansion here on the ascendant, and it applies a trine to the sun in Scorpio, who is on the cusp of the 9th house. Classically, the 28th mansion is described as one that increases fishes and lets them gather in one place, which is super helpful if you are a fisherman, specifically commercial, But since that's not something that a lot of people do these days, the 28th mansion sounds like one of those ones that is kind of difficult to use. But of course, we're able to modify and alter how we approach the 20th mansion to get us, increases in kind of whatever or to cause whatever we need to gather in one place to do so. And we would do that by altering our petition and just kind of being very clear about what we need instead of just being like, okay, you decide, because we're just going to open our doors and like fish are just going to fly in, which may be helpful, keep you from shopping for a while. But other than that, it's not that great. Now we do have an alternate time, so if you can't do like kind of the 1:51 p.m. time that we have here, we also have a time later on in the day when the moon has come to the midheaven, like so. And the moon's still in that mansion, and she still applies her trine to the sun, who's now in the 5th house. And this one might be kind of a better setup for this mansion, because now the lord of the 1st house is in the 10th house instead of in the 9th house, which is a bit more angular and kind of a bit better. But this may be kind of an easier setup to get things rolling with what you need. It may also be very helpful for issues in like procreation and childbearing, so something to keep in mind there. Fortunately, Western Europe can also make a 28th mansion talisman this day. They're going to have to wait until nightfall, around 8:40 p.m. But there's an opportunity here with the moon on the midheaven within the 28th mansion and applying the trine to the sun like she was in the North American version. And it's a little bit rare when we have overlap like this. Usually the moon has moved kind of past whatever application we were trying to get in the US version. But here it's the same one. And so this is one that Western Europe can also utilize, which is fortunate. Yes, Ty? You want up there? Go up there. Go get it. She got confetti on her feet. Whoop. Super Ty. All right. There's another talismanic option for Western Europe just one day later on the 18th of November around 8:40 p.m., which is kind of unique. And this is the mansion... this is a talisman for the 1st mansion of the moon. And the 1st mansion of the moon is very kind of like primordial creation energy. It's the kind of talisman that you make to kind of kick things off or get things going, to kind of, move past your inertia or your anxiety or your discomfort with it. It's kind of like the kickstart to starting a project or to putting yourself out there in a way that can be very, noticeable and positive and very productive. And a lot of us have a lot of really great ideas that we're holding back onto from executing for one reason or another. And the 1st mansion is a really great kind of light a fire under you to get you going. And so Western Europe has the option to make a talisman for this mansion on November 18th at 8:40 p.m. Here the moon has made it to the midheaven. She's the ruler of the 1st house and the 10th house. And she's applying a very nice trine with Jupiter here in the 5th house. So this is a really great configuration to kind of get, the blessings of this new Jupiter in Sagittarius for whatever venture it is that you have in your head that you've been kind of hesitating to get started. So, go and get them, Tiger. So that's all of the elections that I have for you for this waxing moon period. I know in the beginning of the video I mentioned that there are 5 elections I was going to share with you, and if you kept count, I only shared 4. And the reason for that is that as I was going through and preparing to talk about the 5th election, I realized that I overlooked something that was actually kind of crucial. And so I ended up not liking it and discarding that election. One of the great things about the new moon occurring in the sign Scorpio, and probably really the only positive thing about it, is that the section of the zodiac that is connected with the 3rd lunar mansion moves into the waxing half of the zodiac. And the 3rd lunar mansion is one of my absolute favorite mansions, and that's what this election was going to be for. And I got kind of excited and jumped the gun on it, because when we lose the ability to work with the 3rd lunar mansion, really, when the sun exits the sign of Aries, because then when the moon is in this mansion in relation to the sun, she's waning, and it's just no good for this mansion. But I'm sure there will be one in the future to share with you guys, and I will see you guys at the Gemini full moon.